everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Ask an Expert. We are joined here by Sarah Jacobson, and she has so willingly offered to share some information on fox hunting with us. And I could not be more excited to cover this topic. I was telling Sarah before this that my experience fox hunting, I think, was like a highlight of my whole life. So this is a topic that I am really, really thrilled to dive into with you tonight, Sarah. And
Awesome.
Sarah, before we get started, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and as many of my friends will say, it's definitely something I like to nerd out on and love talking to people about fox hunting. So it's a
Well,
pleasure.
that sounds perfect for us. We benefit from that for sure. So very much appreciated. And kind of as always, if you're tuning in live, feel free to put any questions that you have in chat. I will relay those over to Sarah, and then everybody who submitted your questions ahead of time, thank you so much for doing so. I will start with those. But before we dive into member questions, Sarah, can you just tell us a little bit more about your experience with horses and how you got involved with fox hunting? If we get a little bit of background, I think it can help us for the rest of the hour.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I was very, very lucky. Grew up with a mother who was an avid fox hunter. Loved fox hunting. Still does. She's in her early 80s, so she doesn't ride anymore. But she was really my biggest supporter, and my father was a veterinarian, so it just sort of I was very lucky. So I grew up on a farm, grew up with pony club and eventing and all those things, but started fox hunting with my mother at a very young age. I grew up in the sort of upstate New York and primarily hunted with Limestone Creek out of Cazenovia, which at the time was a drag hunt. And we hunted with Genesee Valley on the other side of the state. And also got a tremendous amount of experience with a farmer pack, which is a small, unrecognized pack. So lots of different experiences. And, certainly as I got older, I got more into competing and polo and all these other wonderful things. But after school and graduate school and all that stuff, I made my way back. And I think, it's funny, things that pop into your head when you're a younger person and you want to compete and you want to, do all these things. And now I'm thinking, why in the world was that important? But so it's been wonderful to get back into fox hunting, and now it's really something I'm pushing hard for and trying to do as much as I can. Yeah.
That's really cool. And where are you located now?
So I live in the seacoast of New Hampshire, and I got back into fox hunting with Wentworth, which is a New Hampshire-based hunt club, and was able to hunt with them as a member. I was their hunt secretary for a number of years and also a whipper-in. And now I'm with Myopia, which is in Massachusetts, and they're the oldest drag pack in the country. So they've been a wonderful team, and so that's where I am right now.
Awesome. Yeah. And don't worry, I will get into having you explain the different positions in a hunt, because you just gave a couple of those, and I want to make sure we get to that. But
absolutely,
before we do so, I know that you recently spent some time fox hunting overseas. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Sure. And actually, do you want me to share some photos?
That'd be great. Here, they're on the screen.
Okay. So yeah, so we have just to get our imagination going. These are just some. Let's see here. I have some photos from Myopia. Those of you that are in the Northeast might know that there's an all New England joint meet, and so this is some pictures from those where a bunch of the New England hunts come together. It's usually it's always hosted by Myopia Hunt Club. So these are just some neat pictures from that meet this year. Yes, so this is the first picture from England. So for me, I have a natural born Anglophile for sure, and had so many sort of English sort of inspirations through my life. My father was a veterinarian and was, very much into James Harriet, and my mother was a fox hunter, and yada, yada, yada. So it was really a bucket list sort of trip for me to go to England. And I was very lucky to have a good friend that sort of just jumped on and said, yeah, let's go, book it. So this last year, or this last December, we flew into Heathrow, and we signed up. As you're doing research, it's kind of amazing. I mean, compared to obviously the United States, everything is so tight together and you feel like you can see everything, within a short period of time. And there's so many hunts, in within reasonable distance of each other. So it's really exciting. And during my research, I found this 7 hunts in 7 days challenge, which was run by DG Equine in Gloucestershire. And we joked that we must have been inebriated when we signed up, because as it got closer, we thought, this will be interesting. But basically, the idea was we got there early. We had a day. This is a picture with Joe Aston, who we wanted to get some good instruction on how to jump hedges and ditches and just get us really in the mode, and jump things like gates and wire, which we typically don't jump in the US. So we embarked on this challenge. We rode with Joe, which I'll talk about, as we go along. And she just gave us just the most spectacular, advice, and really got us tuned up. And then we embarked on this 7-day challenge. So we ended up hunting with 7 different hunts over 7 days. And we expected to be on 7 different horses, but luckily we were able to have a couple days where we were on the same horse. So it wasn't a pure new challenge every single day, but that obviously added to it. And it was just unbelievable, like nothing I've ever experienced before. So we ended up, we were sort of in the Cotswolds region, close to the border of Wales, and we ended up hunting with the Vale of Whitehorse, Cotswolds, Heathrow, Ledbury, Beaufort, the Barclay, and the Staff College Drag. So it's pretty amazing.
That is so cool. And is this something that anybody can sign up for, or how do you get into it?
Yeah. So I mean, the concept of hirelings, or having horses that are trained for fox hunting or for different things, team chases and so forth, but specifically for fox hunting, definitely is more prevalent in the UK than here, but we certainly have some hirelings depending on the region. But there it really is more of an industry, Mm-hmm. And so DG Equine had all of these really well-trained hunt horses, and, provided a different horse and got us to the meet and organized our fees and all that stuff, and sort of put the whole thing together. I think it is ultimately,
Flip those way.
I don't know if the audio is coming through. I just wanted to go through some of these things. But
oh my gosh, it's so cool.
I'll go back to it. But yeah, so it pretty much is open to anyone. I mean, obviously, I think you want to be a capable rider. Yeah. I'm certainly not the best rider in the world, but I think you obviously want to be comfortable riding cross country, and you don't really actually even need to jump, but obviously our focus was going and jumping. So.
Yeah. That actually is we will, one of our member questions was kind of on that topic about how the various levels, but I will, rather than take us off on a tangent here, I promise I will get there. Can you, I think that there's a lot more to learn about this overseas hunt, and I think I would love to hear more about those stories. And if it works for you, if we get through all the questions, we can come back to, and we can just dive into this hunt in more detail. Okay, perfect. Can you tell us a little bit more about what a typical, if there even is like a typical hunt, what that entails?
Sure. Well, so And certainly, you know, there are some distinct differences between hunting in the UK and hunting in the US. But, you know, according to MFHA, so MFHA, Masters of Foxhounds Association, is sort of the governing body for fox hunting in North America. So they are a great resource and have a lot of different pamphlets and pieces of information on their website. So that's always a good place to go. But yeah, so fox hunting, there's recognized hunts in, I think, 35 states across the country. And they mix that there's a mix between drag hunting, which is following a human laid scent, and live hunting, which follows quarry or live quarry or a live animal, typically would be fox or coyote, depending on the region. And so, you know, some people have a desire to do one or the other, but, you know, there's definitely a mix. I think you'd find more of the drag packs are in areas like the Northeast, where there's been so much urban sprawl that due to, you know, land or development, you know, for safety reasons, drag is the better option. But, you know, I think as in regards to describing the day, I mean, honestly, it's one of the most exhilarating things you could ever do on horseback. And it's a wonderful way to see the open country and see the territory around you. You know, fox hunters are very focused on land conservation. So that's another piece of this that really gets people passionate. But, you know, general sort of layout of the day is, you know, the meets or the hunts will have locations that are predetermined. And you usually, you know, will arrive half an hour in advance, get tacked up, introduce yourself to the secretary, introduce yourself to the masters, get on your horse, and depending on your comfort level and your horse's comfort level, you may decide to ride in one of the fields that they offer. And then, you know, the day really can vary dramatically, right? I mean, and that's one of the things that's so fun about fox hunting is that even if it's drag versus live, you know, every day can be different. And some days, you know, the scenting conditions are good, so the hounds are flying, right? And every run is catching your breath. And there's other days where it's a little bit slower, and you get to see the hounds work through the trees or through that territory, and you have more time to socialize. So, you know, every day is a little different.
Got it. So the course, I mean, and some of these questions, bear with me. Like I am going into this with very little information. The course is not predetermined at all. It's decided as you go.
So in live hunting, where they're actually following a live animal, right?
Yeah.
You know, that there's obviously no predetermination other than they might decide, okay, we're going to go to this farm, we're going to start in this area, or we're going to go to this region of our territory and we're going to hunt there. But beyond that, you know, only the fox or the coyote knows where they're going to be going. With a drag hunt, it is predetermined, because again, there might be roads, highways, things that impact hound and horse and human safety that determine where that line is going to be laid. But again, that is part of the difference between the two, is that usually drag packs have more limited territory, and that's why they are doing it that way, so that they can keep hounds safe and make sure that they don't go into an area that would be dangerous or risky.
Yeah. And are the majority of hunts drag?
I would say the majority are live in this country.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then again, you know, depending on location, you have drag packs as well.
Wow. Okay. And then for the live hunts, how do they manage, like, or how do they control for when the trail inevitably takes them in a place that you're not allowed to go?
Yeah, I mean, so the staff, the people that are working the hounds, that are sort of in charge of the day, they know the territory guide boundaries, and so they may pick up those hounds and sort of say, "Oh, we're done working here, and we're going to go somewhere else." They're very savvy at knowing what to do in those cases, but. The staff, the huntsmen, the whipper-ins, the people that are working with the hounds every day, that are hunting them on a regular occasion, they also sort of know the paths. They know the territory. They know sort of where to start and where they might end. And a lot can happen during the day, but they ultimately will make that decision.
Got it. And I think it would be a good time to probably get into some of this vocabulary.
Sure.
Can you describe those different roles and kind of what they entail and how you become one and everything that kind of goes into that?
Sure. Yeah, and I would say, so when I was a hunt secretary, and still to this day, I think, some of the etiquette and the formality of fox hunting can be overwhelming. But please, please, please know, it ultimately is what makes fox hunting unique and special and very different. And all of these things are really steeped in hundreds of years of tradition. And the more that you learn over time, you'll realize that, all of these terms and vocabulary help with communication. They help with clearer communication. They help with safety. They help with, respecting the landowner. Like there's a reason for all of these things is what I'm trying to get at. And it may seem overwhelming and seem like, oh gosh, this is just one other thing to sort of learn. But I've tried to distill it. I think, if you're brand new and you're just, trying to get out there and see if you like it, see if your horse likes it. The list I came up with is, obviously knowing the individuals of the hunt, so the staff and the VIPs, right, of the hunt, that's the most important. Who's who? And then also, just the basic idea of the different seasons and, basic commands that you might encounter in the field. So, to start off, I always say, your hunt secretary is your most important person, especially as a new fox hunter. Every hunt will have a designated hunt secretary, and their role is to, provide crucial information, provide information on, where you're meeting, the attire that's appropriate, all those different questions that a new member would have, the hunt secretary should be able to answer. And obviously they also collect the capping or the fees for the day. But it's always a great sign when you reach out to your hunt secretary and ask permission to join them for the day. So things like that, those little bits of etiquette go a long way. It's very true that, fox hunting is absolutely a privilege, and there's a lot that goes into being able to have access to those riding areas and be able to ride behind those hounds and so forth. So the first thing you can do, if I could give you a tip to walk away with, if you walk away with anything, it should be that be really courteous and kind and ask permission, from your secretary, and most will bend over backwards to help you and answer any question. So, don't think that any question is too silly. It's always better to just check and ask, and then you'll be prepared when you get there. So the hunt secretary obviously is very important. And then you have staff. So we'll refer to the staff of the hunt, and that will include the masters or MFHs, master foxhounds. They typically are in command. They're sort of the head honcho that look over the hunt fields, the huntsmen, the staff, the kennels. They're sort of the umbrella and in charge on a higher organizational level. So you have the masters, you have the field masters. So in many cases, that's the same person, but a field master is going to be the person that's designated to lead that riding field or that group of individuals. Often it's a master or it's a person designated by the masters to lead that group. You of course have the huntsman. So in many cases, this is a professional that does this as a full-time job. Or in many cases, especially through the US, it's an honorary or volunteer position. And so the huntsman cares, trains, and in every aspect for the hounds. They control them in the field, they hunt them, they typically walk them, exercise them, feed them, all of those things. And then typically they're also in charge of the whipper-ins, which is another staff member, and those are basically assistants to the huntsman. So they're on horseback and they will be assisting to control the hounds and hunt for the day. So that's basically your staff. And many hunt clubs also have like a board of directors, but typically don't need that for your first outing. So just knowing who those individuals are or asking who those individuals are, and obviously introducing yourself and thanking them is an important part of the morning, and having enough time to do that when you first get to a fox hunt is vital. And again, I think anyone who's nervous, I think about coming out, it's just like doing any other new discipline is, most fox hunters are incredibly friendly. They want people to join in. They want people to learn about the sport. And so, the best thing you can do is say, hey, I'm really excited about this. Tell me more, tell me what I need to know. And, they'll help you.
Totally.
Sure.
And Sarah, how many hounds are generally in? Is it determined by like how many horses are in the hunt, or how does that work?
No, it's so hounds, and that would be another vocabulary term, is that we've always referred to them as hounds, not dogs. They are foxhound, which is a unique breed. And obviously in the US, we typically have American foxhounds, and we also have the Penn Meridell foxhound. And then we also have, obviously for many years, imported foxhounds from England, Ireland, France, and so forth. But so they're called hounds. We count them in couples or in twos. And it's really more determined by, I would say, the territory, so the amount of land that a hunt has to hunt, the comfort of the huntsman or the preference of the huntsman of how many hounds. Usually drag packs have smaller packs than live packs. There's a lot of different things that go into it, and obviously budget, right? But you can have clubs that might have, let's say, 12 to 20 hounds, right? 6 to 10 couple, and you may have some that have up to 40 couple. So it can vary tremendously.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And how long does the hunt usually take? Is there a set amount of time? What can you kind of expect?
So, again, with a lot of these things, if you're brand new, reaching out to the hunt secretary and sort of asking, there's different seasons in fox hunting. So, and this also differs slightly depending on where you are. Obviously, our season in Massachusetts is very different than Florida, right? But in general, there's a roding season, which is more what someone would think of as mounted hound exercise. So the hounds are not hunting anything, but it's a chance to get the hounds exercised, horses exercised. It's a great chance for puppies or young entry to be trained and go with the pack. And it's a great chance for new riders and new horses to just be in that atmosphere. So I always encourage people, if they can time it and bring their horses out during roding, that is a wonderful time to expose your horse to the hounds and just riding in a group. And then from roading season, typically you'll progress to autumn hunting. This is sometimes called, informal season, or traditionalists will call it cubbing. And this is usually late summer, early fall. Things are not really cracking along, but the hounds will be working and will be hunting. So that adds another element to it. And then, after 6 to 8 weeks of that autumn hunting, then you go into formal. And at that point, everybody's fit, everybody's ready to go. And, that's sort of the exciting season where things are much higher paced. So for newbies, I always, say if you can come during roading and then, progress through autumn season, that's ideal.
Yeah. And what is like the baseline, if there is a baseline, a skill level or ability level for both horse and rider, and kind of how does the spectrum work? You had mentioned earlier fields. Is like riders are broken up by their own skill level, or like how does that work?
Right. Yeah. And I realize I totally blasted through your question of timing. So, so usually as the seasons go along, the hunts get longer, I guess is the easiest way to explain it. Roading might be an hour and a half. If it's super hot, it might be shorter than that. Autumn season, again, it sort of depends on if it's live or drag, but let's say anywhere between 1 and 3 hours. And then as we progress, again, anywhere between 1 and 4 hours is probably average. But your secretary would sort of know what's common for that territory that time of year. But obviously you want your animal and you want you to be fit and prepared. So for skill level, so most hunts typically have at least 3 fields. So they'll have 3 groups of riders that all have their own field master or someone that's sort of leading them and watching out for them. And typically those fields are hilltoppers. So they will typically go at the slowest pace, but still, may walk, trot, canter, maybe super slow gallop, but typically no jumping. They take a lot of shortcuts, and the idea is that they can sort of get to the hilltop first and then watch the hunt come through. So in many cases, they see the real action. If you have a good field leader in hilltop, you're golden, because you'll actually probably see more than everybody else. Then you have second field. And so they will typically be up behind the hounds, but at a more moderate pace. They may jump everything. They may pick and choose. Sort of depends on the hunt rules and the discretion of the field master that day. And then you have first field, which is fastest pace, right behind the hounds, up and seeing everything, and typically jumping everything. So there's always options, and you can always confirm that ahead of time and make sure that they will be having 3, sometimes 4 fields. Again, your secretary will be able to tell you that. But again, I think hilltopping is a great place to start. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that even through the day, you can change fields. So sometimes it's easier than other times, but there will typically be checks or a pause at times. And if you're thinking, oh gosh, I'm bored to tears, or oh gosh, this is, my horse is really not too happy with this today, you can always ask your field master if you can change, go up or go down. And then you typically ask permission from the other field master of where you're going, and they will, say yes or no. So that's kind of nice to know that you're not stuck the whole day. You can move around if needed. But, again, I think you certainly don't need to be an Olympic rider, but I think you need to have the ability to walk, trot, canter over natural terrain. You need to be able to hold yourself in 2 points. You need to be able to deal with branches and, be able to have an independent seat. But, I think that being said, obviously, if there's any concerns, you can always let your field master know. And most hunts, are incredibly gracious. And if you say, hey, I'm really nervous, I need a chaperone, or we'll call it a bumper. If you need a really experienced horse that you can bump off of, if you're not sure if your horse has good brakes, usually people will be very inviting and sort of say, hey, I'll put you with so-and-so, and they'll keep you safe for the day.
And what's the general, like you mentioned, like breaks and opportunities to switch between which field you're in? What's the general rhythm of the day? Like how much are you like going, and then like how many of these breaks are there? Kind of what can you expect?
Oh gosh. Well, I hate to come back to this, but it does vary tremendously. So for example, drag hunt, I'll use Myopia as an example. We early autumn season, we might be out for an hour and a half. We typically gather, they might do morning announcements. People get into their fields, figure out who field masters are. And there might be, we've been trying to actually do better at having sort of a warm up and sort of getting the hounds and the horses moving, maybe, even 10 minutes going down some trails. And then we might have 2 to 3 lines. So again, in drag hunting, it's a predetermined line that's laid by a human, right? So we might have a line that, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes. And so obviously when the hounds are working and they've gotten onto a line and they're following that scent, they're going to be giving tongue, or they're going to be barking, they're going to be voicing, right? And so there's usually this big sort of surge of energy when that happens. And you're off to the races, as my mother always used to love to say. So, but again, depending on which field you are in, if you're in first field, you're off and you're following the hounds as fast or slow as they're going, and the other fields are sort of following behind. Okay. But so with the drag hunt, like they'll have those lines, and they might have like a 3 to 5 minute break in between. In live hunting, it's very different, right? You might be walking or trotting or trying to find the quarry for 15 minutes. It might be an hour. It might be 2 hours, right? And then all of a sudden, when the hounds find something, again, you're off. So it's so unpredictable. But again, that's sort of what makes it fun. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. It's also helpful to know, like going in, it's not unusual for you not to know what to expect. I think even just having that like knowledge can help people feel a little bit calmer going into their first one, because it's not like just like, oh, I, Kinsey, as a first timer, don't know what to expect. It's like, oh no, Sarah also doesn't know what to expect in the day, like, and she's a pro. So one question that we got from a member, Lee, was asking, because she's like, we are always hear all the time how crazy like eventers are for going out on cross country, and like it's a wild thing to go do. But she was like, but then there's fox hunters who, it's not like you can like go walk your course. Like you really don't know what to expect of like, oh, I'm going to be jumping this like whatever log or this ditch or what have you. You don't have any sort of predetermined knowledge of that, assuming it's a live hunt. How do you kind of manage your nerves as a rider going into that without having that knowledge? Is there kind of the comfort in knowing that you could always just go around it or skip it, or like how does kind of nerves come into this?
Well, as I was preparing for this, I did come up with some basic sort of ideas of, how do you get a horse ready for this? And that could be a whole discussion in itself, right? And getting the human and the mental piece ready is obviously another piece of it. I think, so even when things are not completely planned out, like in a live hunt, you still generally have an idea of what's in that territory, right? So like if they know that, oh, we're going to these 3 farms and we're going to this area, the path and the way that we go might not be determined, but you would generally know, oh, okay, that territory has walls up to 3-3. That territory has panels. That territory has wire or whatever, right? So I think it's not like you're going in completely blind most of the time. Although that being said, obviously things can absolutely happen. But you're right in that you cannot go out and typically walk it. Although I would say, you know, for many hunts, hunter paces are a great chance to ride through fox hunting territories and to see those obstacles that are used, you know, in hunts. So that's always a great way to see at least, or get a taste of it. I think it comes down to preparation. I mean, so I talk with people about this a lot in that, you know, there is sort of a thought that with fox hunting, it's not a competition. It's sort of a free for all. Just get on and go. Well, you can do that for sure. And you can do that and go to a hunter show too. But you're not going to be as successful as if you know, get prepared at home, do your homework, make sure that you're fit, make sure that your horse is fit. I mean, you know, it's all the same stuff. So, you know, if you're worried about it or you're not quite sure, or you're on a horse that's a little bit green or isn't 100%, you don't go in first field, right? You don't go in the place where you're expected to jump something and to keep up. You go in second field and you wait until you and your horse are ready. So I think preparation is something that sometimes fox hunters don't do enough of. And, you know, and that's probably where a lot of the, you know, those crazy fox hunter memes come from. But, you know, it is, I think there are a lot of elements that can be very, when you first get to a fox hunt, I mean, it really can be high energy. There's a lot of horses. There's the, you know, there's the hounds, there's the horn, there's, you know, there's a lot going on and it can be overwhelming. And so I think you just have to take it step by step, and you have to treat it like any other sport where you do have to do your time and take your time, do your homework and move up the level slowly.
Yeah, and that's a good transition into Terry's question, which they're asking, how would you introduce your arena safe horse to the open road concept of fox hunting without him absolutely losing his shit? Their words, not mine. They said, I'm moving to Western Pennsylvania this summer and want to join Rolling Rock Hunt, but don't want to be killed in the process. Great question.
That is, and I hope she can do it. Rolling Rock's wonderful. Gosh, you know, I was thinking about this. I mean, so I think, again, it's like any sport. You do as much homework as you can. You try to, you know, replicate as much as you can at home. And at the end of the day, some horses are going to be hunters and some horses are not. And that's the reality. I mean, I think you could probably ask 10 different fox hunters and they'll all have 10 different ways of getting horses prepared. And I certainly am in no way an expert in that, but I think that, you know, I think, again, if the horse has not had any exposure outside, then you can't just jump into fox hunting. I mean, you need to be able to trail ride. You need to be able to at least ride in a group safely, walk, trot, canter in a group. You want to be able to have that control and stability on natural terrain. I mean, you want that as a minimum, right? But I think the more that you can practice, you know, even just things like, can your horse load up, get there, tie to the trailer, tack up, you know, like those basic things that you would expect even, you know, as for a show horse. But, you know, I think just practicing the outside riding, practicing the cross-country jumping over more natural fences, you know, is a great place to start. And then again, you know, I think people will have lots of different opinions about this, but it's not a totally sink or swim thing. You know, there are horses that you get them there and they figure it out. Their ears are pricked. They figured out who's who. We're going after these guys. You know, like they figure it out so quickly and you're like, oh my gosh. And they're really into it. There's other horses that take a little bit longer. I have a thoroughbred that I whip off of, and I thought I was gonna die the first few times I took him out. But I did quite a bit of homework. I had good friends that were with me. And I think that's important, is that if you get into a situation where you say, I have got to go home, you've got to be able to have someone that knows the territory, that's with you, that can take you home. So having a contingency plan, I think, is also very important. And that's why I think also, if you're really nervous, go out during roading where there won't be any actual hunting, and just see how your horse does with that. Some horses need a couple years. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if fox hunting becomes the thing that you really want to do, again, going back to this one thoroughbred I have, he's a quirky personality, but he's now going into his third year and he's butter, right? But it's taken that week in, week out of going, him figuring it out, him realizing, oh, we're on a check. I don't need to bounce around. I can stand here and take a break. Like they figure out the cadence of the day over time. And the reality is, obviously, there's some horses that just won't do that. There are horses where it's not their jam. But I think, you just want to give yourself time and have some good people that can give you some honest feedback of, okay, just keep plugging away, or we got to go in a different direction, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it feels like a sport that it's really important to just like to lean on the elders of the sport, like the people who have been doing it for a long time, because there are going to be a lot of unknowns, and it might feel like you're like, my assumption just from talking to you is that that's a very welcome thing to do, is to have somebody ask a lot of questions and ask for help and all those things. That's not something that's like taboo in this environment at all.
No, and again, going back to sort of the vocabulary and it all, it's impossible to absorb that all at once, but there are some really good resources out there. Most big hunt clubs will typically have a glossary page on their website. They have a lot of good information about the fields, etiquette, dress. So again, like, you don't want to go to a horse show and not read the rules, right? I mean, so it's the same thing with fox hunting. Like, do your homework. It's not like you have to be an expert when you show up, but you should generally have an idea of, okay, who am I looking for, what I should be doing, some basic terminology, and you'll be way ahead. Again, the MFHA has an intro to fox hunting pamphlet, which also is free. You can get a PDF online. And so that's always a really good starting place.
Absolutely. And Grace is asking, other than well-fitting, clean hunt tack with a white shaped pad, what do I need for a horse's turnout if I go ride with my formal Saturday hunt as a guest? She said, do I braid hunt braids? Do I braid the tail? She said, no one in the photos I've seen online is braided on rat catcher or formal days. How would you turn your horse out as a guest at an unfamiliar hunt?
That's a great question. Again, I would email the secretary. So when you are a guest, so you're not a paid member or subscriber of that hunt, it's typically termed capping. So you'll be joining the hunt as a guest, you'll be paying a cap fee, and you'll be capping for the day. And that stems back to, they used to collect payments and the cap, right? And they would come from horse to horse and collect your cap fee. So again, it depends on the season. She's absolutely correct. So like in autumn hunting or informal hunting, they'll typically wear rat catcher tweed. In formal season, you'll wear, black hunt coat or blue hunt coat. And I certainly we can maybe put these notes together and give people sort of the bullet points. But I would just reach out to the secretary, and, you're going to ask permission to go out that day as a guest, get information about how to pay the cap, waivers, all of those different things. And then, simply just say, what is the appropriate attire? Now, typically you would assume that, yes, if it's autumn hunting, you would be in rat catcher. So you would either have a normal men's tie or a stock tie. You would typically be wearing a tweed coat, beige or rust or sort of muted tan breeches. And then to be truly correct, you'd be wearing brown boots, but most hunts allow black boots as well. And then obviously a black helmet with a harness. But there's so much variation. And I think the important thing is that if you're brand new and you're still trying to figure out if you even like this, don't be worried about attire, because you can typically ask your hunt secretary and say, hey, I just want to try this. I have a black show coat and I have, tan breeches and I have black boots, and most will say no problem. Or they'll say, hey, we can find someone that has a tweed that's the same color. Don't worry about it. So I think you just reach out in advance and confirm all those details. The braiding. So again, you can ask, is braiding required? Typically, most hunts don't require braiding except on what we call high holy days. So those might be like the blessing of the hounds, joint meets, where you're having two hunts that are coming together to hunt together. And then things like Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, like special holiday hunts. Typically, when they send out the hunt information or they give you the hunt information, they'll say braiding required, because it's not a norm except for staff in most places.
Got it. And how do you find, like, how would you recommend finding a local hunt? Like, where do you go to look?
Well, so there is actually a great interactive map on the MFHA website. So there's a roster or an index of all of the hunts based on organized by state, but then also there's a nice map so you can see what's in your area and how far. Those are the recognized hunts that are registered with the MFHA. Sometimes there are smaller hunts that aren't recognized that might be in your area. But that would be a great starting point. And then I think, again, if you can connect yourself with anyone with local hunts, then usually they have more information or, might sort of be able to sort of guide you and say, hey, this is a very new member friendly hunt. This is a hunt that you might graduate to once you have more experience, like those sort of ins and outs. An experienced person might be able to tell you.
I think that intel would be really, really valuable. That is great. That's an option. So Anna is wondering, do you have any advice to help smaller clubs grow? We're a tiny Midwest drag hunt that has a positive community presence, but struggle with member recruitment. I know this is a nationwide concern and would love to hear any ideas or thoughts you have regarding this.
Yeah, I think it definitely is a concern, just like land conservation and territory preservation. I think people are incredibly creative. So when I was hunt secretary, even on Facebook and these different forums, if you ask about fundraising, if you ask about ways to bring in new members, people have the most innovative, wonderful ideas. But I think it's not only attracting people, but it's retaining them, obviously, right? So you have to sort of make sure that the hunt has good information, that people can access that information easily, that you have people in those positions like hunt secretary that are really enthusiastic about bringing people in. That's people's sort of first view of, whether or not they want to try this. And so I think that's more really important ultimately. If they get to your website and they can't find the waiver, if they can't find any information, if they don't get a response from the secretary, like that leaves a lasting impression. But beyond that, I think, and you said they were out west, is that what you said?
Midwest. I think
Midwest.
She's talking about Minnesota, I believe.
Okay. So I think people are really just trying to reach out. I know a lot of hunts in our area are obviously reaching out to the show individuals or the eventers and trying to recruit them in different ways. I've heard of certainly hunts, all over, but certainly maybe more in the Midwest that are encouraging Western riders to come out. Some have policies where they can join them at any time. Others might have special days or special times throughout the season where they invite, Western riders to come and join them. So I think there's lots of ways to maybe reach out to people from different disciplines. I think also just, having introductory clinics and having a chance to catch some of these people who are worried about the attire, worried about not knowing this and that. We have to make it more accessible and provide that education. And I think once people have that education, then they feel empowered to move forward and see if it works for them. But I think it's something that's always evolving, and people are always trying to figure out new ways. But I guess that's where I would start. And honestly, if anybody has questions or wants to brainstorm, you can always give them my email, and I'd love to talk with them more about it too.
Yeah, and I don't know how real this is, but the time that I went fox hunting, I borrowed a horse. Like, I showed up and they had a horse ready for me. And I wonder how, I mean, that's probably hard to do because you can't, there's not just like unlimited horses for people to go and jump on. It's also, you're not only like, the horse might be familiar with fox hunting, but now you're catch riding. So that's another dynamic. But just from my own experience, that helped because I had an event horse and I was like, I don't really know about if they're ready for this, but I would love to try. So having the option to maybe use a horse that has done it before, I think could help as well.
Yeah. So, and again, I think, in the UK, it's the hirelings it's just more of it's just built into the fabric of what they're doing. But definitely there are hirelings in the US. It just really depends on the region. And again, your hunt secretary might be the best person to reach out about that. But even some of the, fox hunting exchanges on Facebook and different places, you can sort of say, hey, I want to hunt with so-and-so. Does anyone have hirelings? Or there are sometimes even just very generous members who might say, yeah, I've got this old retired guy. You can go in Hilltop. It might not be the perfect situation, but it could get you started and take that step forward and just let you see if you even enjoy the environment.
It's just dipping your toe in the water. And I know I'm out of context. I know what hireling is, but hireling is just defined. It's just a horse that you like pay to use for the day. Horse for hire. Okay. It's right in the word. And okay, so this is a good time for Ashley's question. And she is saying, as someone who recently discovered fox hunting, I feel like, at least with my hunt, it's hard to bridge the gap between past traditions and the needs and realities of the younger riders finding the sport. Do you have any thoughts on if and how the sport can be modernized to continue to draw in new riders, yet maintain the character and spirit of the sport? Are there hunts that you think do this really well?
Well, I'd love to know where she is. Did she say, like, even region of where she is?
I don't believe she did. I can confirm. And Ashley, if you're here, let us know. But I don't. I
think it's it's a great question. What I found really interesting about hunting in England, I mean, obviously it's so steeped in tradition, and over there, again, I mean, you just feel like you're in this like fair. At least me, again, I just felt like I was in a fairy tale the whole time. I do think, though, that there is a balance. I mean, there are a number of things that tradition can be very important. And again, sort of the vernacular and the reason that we have a lot of these terms and policies really is for the safety of everyone involved, right? So I don't think you want to get rid of any of those core concepts that keep people safe and organized and communicating. But I do think that sometimes maybe the periphery is what, I think, the education that you offer to these fox hunters or clinics or events, or even just the way that you organize your hunt ball. I mean, that, to me, that seems like the place where you might be able to make changes to really bring in more of a younger crowd. But the sport itself, and I don't know, did she have any other specifics? Because I without going into really the nitty gritty of like the pieces you want to keep, the pieces you want to get rid of, it's a hard thing to say. But I think
So she's in Minnesota. So we got her location. Grace just added a question that's kind of related. She's saying, like, where do you see the sport being in 20 years? She said, I'm in Maryland, and fox hunting is super elitist here. I don't see the younger generation continuing the sport, as well as I imagine land access becoming more of an issue. So it's kind of the same thing. It's just like learning about how, if and how, I guess, younger generations are being brought in to this sport that is steeped in so much tradition.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you're ever going to, well, I could get a lot of fire for this, but I mean, I think some of the same discussions obviously are happening around the globe. I mean, anything with horses can be considered elitist. Anything that requires a lot of land is going to be considered elitist, especially depending on the area of the country. I think the way the conduct of the hunt and their ability to bring in new people and their ability to explain and be friendly and all of those things, I mean, that, is on a club to club basis. And that really can change, I think, how the individual feels about the experience, because I think you can have a hunt that has access to beautiful territory and going past these mansions and all this stuff, but it doesn't need to be stuffy in the communication of person to person, right? So it still comes down to how are the masters organizing their hunt, and how are all of the different personnel communicating with members and so forth. But land preservation, land use is going to continue to be an issue. I mean, hunts are getting pushed out of areas. Even hunts that have been there for generations, in Virginia are closing or having to move to different territories because of urban sprawl. It's going to continue to be an issue, I think. And so either people are going to go more to drag. I think that's one solution that people are going to find, is that they're not going to be able to hunt live, and they're going to have to go in more determined places. And in order to keep everybody safe, they're going to have to switch to drag, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of things that you can retain with drag hunting. But for the purists, it may just be that they continue to move away from those traditional territories. And you also may have a change in quarry. So, fox hunting, obviously we all think of it going after a fox, but, many hunts that are sort of sprawling into other areas, and especially in the South, they're going after coyotes. And whether or not you agree with that, in many cases, they've been incredibly successful, because there's a lot of farmers who don't want the coyotes, that are struggling with the coyote population, and have welcomed them with open arms, because this has become a problem. So I think it's a hard thing to predict. I think it's going to get harder and harder, like any other equine sport, just because of land. But it is a sport that's pretty adaptable in some ways. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. And I do think, in regards to the younger generation, connecting with pony clubs is so important. Having people bringing out their children is so important. I mean, I think I'm a good example, because my mother was so passionate, and I hated getting up that early, and I hated braiding my pony. But then years later, it was the thing I went back to, because I had all those core memories, and it was my comfort zone, and it was so wonderful. So I do think, you have the possibility of getting kids, especially at the right age, and then they come back around, after school and all those things. So that, I think that's still really important, to be reaching out to the younger generation. In some ways, we're sort of missing the middle. So I have a lot of clubs that are aging out in many ways, and their leadership is aging out or heading in that direction. And then, they're making efforts to connect with the local pony club, local riding group, but they don't necessarily have the middle. They don't have the young professional. So I do think that the clubs that have been most successful really make a concerted effort to sort of say, okay, you can only come out once a week. You're a young professional, whether it's an equine professional or just a young working professional, and they have different levels of membership to make that worthwhile. again, club to club basis, people can agree or disagree whether that's doable for the hunt. But what I saw with one of the clubs I was with is that by having sort of different levels of membership, you didn't lose out in the long run. It actually was very successful. And you got people in the door by sort of saying, okay, you can, you'll be limited to 12 hunts a year or something like that, but you can pay a much smaller amount, or you can pay it in 2 payments, like all these different things make it more accessible. And I think people have to do that if they're going to get the working rider.
Yeah, and there's no reason not to. Like, I feel like I think that's such a good idea, and like it feels like the more ways that we can make it accessible for more people, I think the better, because it improves everyone's experience, I would hope. But I have loved learning about this so much, Sarah.
Okay.
Are there, on the topic of fox hunting 101, like are there any things that you haven't mentioned that you want to get out there, or any tips or tricks, or I just want to make sure that you feel like you've had the opportunity to share your expertise?
I know. Well,
it's a lot. I know.
It's so much. And like I said, if there's a way to share with people sort of these bullet points, I think that'll be helpful. And definitely if you want to share my email, like I love questions and going through all that. So, I think the thing is it's such a wonderful sport, and I encourage anybody who's even thinking about it, even if you just go out and follow on foot or follow in your car, just to see that group of hounds and horses going through a field. I mean, it's like nothing else. And I think, there's lots of ways to be involved in hunting. We didn't really talk much about this, but being a car follower, being a foot follower, being a volunteer in other ways. So even if you don't ride, but you just like being out in the countryside, there's a lot of avenues. But I think the thing is, just try to sort of collect as much information as you can, reach out to people who you think are good resources, be humble. It's kind of like any new thing, right? And I think you'll find that people will be inviting and enthusiastic for you to join. And I wish you luck. Yeah, I think everybody should try it. And, even if you don't like it the first day, try it again. Because again, things can change.
Absolutely. I could not recommend it more to people. I know I've only done it once, but like, for having only done it once and it's still a highlight, I think that is indication of itself how incredible of an experience it is. And yeah, I love the idea of like, just show up, even if you aren't bringing a horse, like show up, and that could be a great way to acclimate yourself with just the environment. And so when you do bring a horse, you're a little bit more comfortable.
Absolutely.
Sarah, the information you provided tonight is so incredibly valuable. And everyone in chat or listening to this recording after the fact, if you do end up going to a fox hunt after this, please report back. We want to hear all about it.
Yeah.
And I know Anna's here in chat. And Anna, if you happen to bring Olaf is Anna's wonderful fjord, who we are all obsessed with. If you happen to bring Olaf to a fox hunt, you have to let us know how it goes.
Perfect.
So, Sarah, on that note, thank you so much for taking the time with us this evening, and we look forward to learning more about fox hunting in the future. But thank you, and have a great evening.
Okay.